They say the first 100,000 is the hardest, and they're absolutely right. But once you hit that first milestone, wealth building becomes so much easier. The good news is that you don't need to be rich to get there. You just need the right strategy. Most people never reach that first 100,000 because they're stuck doing the wrong things, saving too little, investing too late, or thinking that it's impossible on a normal income. And here's the surprising truth. The hardest part isn't actually making the money. It's shifting your mindset and habits to make money work for you. So what if I told you that there's a simple, proven way to get through that first 100,000 and make wealth building easier from there? In this video, I'll walk you through the exact steps to get there. No get-rich-quick schemes, just a straightforward plan that actually works. Here's a simple formula for wealth building. Time multiplied by rate of return multiplied by capital. If I asked you which of the three components is the most important, what would you say? If you said time, let's invest $1 at a realistic rate of return of 8% for 30 years. The amount we'll get at the end of 30 years, and this is called future value in finance, is $10.06. Let's make that 30 years into 100 years and see if time actually makes a difference. The number is just over $2,000. So while time does play a role, it doesn't look like you can get rich on time alone. Let's see if it's the rate of return. We've been using 8% rate of return because that's the realistic average rate generated by an index fund following a broad market index like S&P 500. But let's say we have access to an exclusive investment opportunity with 20% expected returns. Okay, we're getting somewhere, but the reality of getting a 20% guaranteed rate of return is very low. People get caught up over chasing slightly higher returns or saving 0.001% in fees. But the truth is, if you invest consistently in a low-cost index fund that tracks the broad market like S&P 500, your consistency will matter far more than any minor adjustments. Let's test the last component. Let's go back to our first scenario of investing at 8% rate for 30 years. But now let's make our initial investment $1,000 instead of $1. We got $10,000. It's a lot more realistic to save and invest an initial $1,000 than 100-year timeline or a steady 20% rate of return. So let's see what 10,000 gets us, 100,000. Now again, it's a lot more realistic to save 10,000 than chasing 100-year timeline or a 20% rate of return. Now, if we go with 100,000 invested over 30 years at 8%, we have $1 million. So the answer to my initial question is capital. Capital is the most important component in wealth building and is the only component we have control over. Initial capital is what the wealthy have and is what you don't have. So it makes sense for first-generation wealth creators to focus on accumulating enough capital to reach a point so that you can start scaling your wealth. Now let's see how this works. On average, for most people, it will take 8 to 10 years to save $100,000 in a regular savings account. If you invest your $10,000 a year in the broad market index at a reasonable rate of return of 8%, it will take about 7.5 years to get to your first 100K. If you continue investing at this rate, it will take you 5 years to get to your next 100,000, 3.5 years to the next, 2.5 years to the next. You get the idea. After the initial lift of getting that first $100,000, it's 22 years to become a millionaire. The first 100,000 is the hardest because it's only 10% of your wealth, but it took you an entire quarter of the timeline to get there. At this time, if you saved your first 100,000 by 30, you have your first million by 60. And if you keep going, it will take 8 years to reach the next million, which puts you at 68, 5.5 to the next million, which puts you at 73. Now, this is real wealth, but at this point, you're 73 years old. It doesn't really leave you a lot of time to enjoy your wealth. So I want to give you a more realistic scenario, recognizing that most people can't save 100,000 by 30, as most people are tied down with student loans and other debt they accumulate in their 20s before learning good money habits. We'll use average salaries according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we'll split the timeline into sprints. The first one starts at age 23 and goes until 29. Your goal here is to pay off debt, learn the right money habits and mindset, and contribute enough to get your employer match. The second sprint starts at 30. Here, your goal is to maximize contribution to your retirement and continue looking for ways to increase your income. This is your longest sprint, so the faster you find a way to make more money, the easier it will be to keep the pace. Your third and final sprint is in your 50s. Here you'll continue to maximize contributions and start taking advantage of catch-up contributions. By the end of your first sprint, with average salary after graduation being about $50,000, your total rate of savings is about $4,000 per year, including your $2,000 and $2,000 that will come from the employer match. So by the end of this sprint, you'll save about $35,000. That's not bad. Having lived on a limited income during your 20s, you can continue with the frugal lifestyle into your 30s. But instead of spending the extra money, which will come from either reduced debt payments or higher salary, use that to build wealth and pay less tax. For an average US salary of $66,600, the effective tax rate will be about 10%. If you maximize your contribution according to the IRS limit and put away $20,000 of pre-tax money, you're lowering your taxable income to $46,600. The effective tax rate on this amount is lower, and so is the amount it's applied to. So here you're saving about $3,000 a year in taxes. Looking at the broader timeline based on these assumptions, you'll save over $90,000 in tax over the next 30 years. On the other hand, you have an option to grow your wealth tax-free by contributing after-tax money into your Roth IRA. If you're able to make additional contributions and decide to allocate it into your Roth IRA, after doing so for 25 years, you can have $500,000. And if you add just 5 more years, that's almost $800,000. Only $200,000 of which is your contribution that you pay taxes on, and the rest, $500,000, is tax-free. Your second sprint starts at 30. Here's where you start maxing out your retirement. Average salary at 30 is $65,000, so your contribution will be $20,000 per IRS limit, and your employer contribution would be about 4% of your salary, so about $2,600. At 8% rate of return, you're getting to your first $100,000 by age 32. It takes you 3 years to get to your next 100 by age 35, then to your next one by age 37, and by 41, you're at $500,000. At 40, your average salary is $7,500. So keeping your contribution at $20,000 and your employer match at 4%, you're now contributing $23,000 a year, and you reach your first million by 47. You're at $1.2 million at the end of this sprint. By the way, I'm including the Google Sheet with all the calculations in my video description, so you can download it and play around with your actual salary, your actual contribution amounts, and see when you will achieve your goal. Your third sprint starts at 50. You can add the catch-up contribution, which is $7,000 in 2025. This gives you $2 million at 55 and $3 million at 59, which is where this sprint ends. Now, this is much faster and more realistic. No pressure to have $100,000 saved by 30, and we're using the average salary throughout the investment years. At this point, you can start spending and your money will grow at a faster rate than you spend. Now, I know that you have bills to pay, and if you're like me, daycare costs that are higher than your rent or mortgage. So let me take you from this theory to how to actually get to your first $100,000, because it's not as easy as setting up direct transfers from your bank account. There are 3 ways to build wealth. The slowest way is by cutting costs and living a frugal life on as little as possible. I know some of you can live with your parents and save on rent and food. Some of you drive cheap cars, and that's great, but it can only get you as far as your salary. If you're earning $50,000 for the next 10 years, you can only save so much. Plus, I'm really not an advocate for not spending money. Spending money is just as big of a skill as saving money. Money is a way to experience things in the world, and if you don't do that in your 20s, if you don't learn that skill in your 20s, you're putting yourself behind. First-generation wealth builders often struggle with transitioning from the scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, even after they've made the money. The habits that help them accumulate wealth, frugality, risk aversion, and a strong focus on saving can sometimes make it difficult to enjoy spending money in a meaningful way. The next way to build wealth is a bit faster, and it's by making more money. If you keep your expenses in check, but every couple years get a 20% raise, which is more than realistic, saving becomes less noticeable and you still get to experience life on that amount. There are no shortcuts to getting a raise. You have to learn as much as you can on your job, invest in your skills, and get the right letters behind your name so you can stand out as a candidate, and actively seek promotions inside and outside of your company. And the third way to build wealth, the fastest way, is by doing both, cutting costs and making more money. Again, watch out for developing a scarcity mindset. If you're making a bank and living in your parents' basement, make it temporary so that you can go out and live your life. My last and very important tip to making this happen is to eliminate having to make a decision to put money away. Set up automated transfers to your retirement plan with your employer, and set up automated transfers from your checking account where you deposit your paychecks to your IRA and individual brokerage accounts. This way you won't even see that money and will not have to rationalize with yourself every time you get paid. If you guys enjoyed this video, I have another one here to help you figure out how to distribute your money once you get paid. And if you're looking for ways to position yourself for a promotion or pivot into a more lucrative career, check out my other video on how to level up your project management skills and make more money. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.